spring of 1915, as the world was being torn apart by the First World War, a baby girl was born in the small Palestinian village of Nouris. Nestled among rolling hills between Nazareth and Jenin, Nouris was little more than a cluster of mud brick homes surrounded by fertile farmland. Yet for this young girl, later known affectionately to her family as Sitti, it was the centre of the world. Palestine was then part of the vast Ottoman Empire, which had ruled the region for nearly 4 centuries. Palestinians had lived here for much longer, for millennia. War raged far beyond the village, but its effects reached even these quiet fields. Trains carrying German soldiers and supplies thundered through nearby Afula, a strategic railway hub, while distant battles were shaping the future of the land. Sitti grew up during the period when the British ruled Palestine following the end of the First World War, the eldest of 5 sisters. Her father was a respected teacher, known not only for his learning, but also for a gift that many believed had been bestowed upon him by God, the ability to heal. Villagers came to him in times of sickness and distress, seeking comfort and remedies. As she grew into adulthood, Sitti married Muhammad. Together they worked the land around Nouris. By modern standards, they owned little, but by the standards of their community, they were prosperous. They had fields to cultivate, food on the table, and a growing family. Their wealth was measured not in money, but in olive trees, harvests, and the security of belonging to a place they loved and called home. By the late 1940s, Sitti and Muhammad had 3 children, Nagia, Ahmad, and a baby daughter named Najah. But then everything changed. During World War II, Palestine served as an important British military base, but in 1947, Britain decided it could no longer manage mandatory Palestine and referred the issue to the United Nations. The United Nations proposed dividing Palestine into separate Arab and Jewish states. The proposal deepened tensions that had already been growing for years due to mass Jewish immigration. When the State of Israel declared independence in 1948, war followed almost immediately. One day, while Sitti and Muhammad were working in their fields, Israeli forces arrived in the area and drove people out of Nouris. There was no time to gather belongings or make plans. Like countless others, they fled into the surrounding mountains. Their children were at home in the village. The 2 elder children, Nagia and Ahmad, escaped with the help of neighbours and somehow found their way to safety. But baby Najah was snatched away. For days, Sitti and Muhammad lived with the unbearable uncertainty of not knowing whether they would ever see their daughter again. Eventually, they discovered that Najah had been taken into the care of a Jewish family now living in Nouris. Through determination and courage, they managed to reclaim her. Their reunion brought relief, but their home was gone. The village they had known no longer existed as theirs. New settlers occupied the land. Belongings had been looted, destroyed, or abandoned. Among the losses were the treasured books belonging to Sitti's father, books that represented a lifetime of learning and knowledge. Sitti, her family, and other villagers wandered for a time, sleeping in the hills, before reaching the nearby Christian town of Zababda. The town had fewer than 1,000 residents, yet its people opened their homes without hesitation. Families who had lost everything were welcomed, fed, and cared for. For months, Sitti and her family lived among strangers who became friends. Eventually, they were directed to a newly established refugee camp near Jenin. The camp was intended to be temporary, a place to stay until people could return home, and most believed that that day would come soon. At first, the refugees lived in tents. They endured heat, cold, rain, and uncertainty. But months turned into years. Slowly, families began replacing canvas with concrete blocks. Streets emerged where rows of tents had once stood. The temporary camp became a permanent community. But it was still a place of waiting, a place where the refugees lived whilst waiting to return home. 19 years passed. In 1967, war arrived again. During the Six-Day War, Israeli forces captured Jenin city and the Jenin refugee camp. Once more, Sitti and her family were forced to leave. Once more, they found refuge in Zababda, this time living for 3 months inside a mosque before returning once again to the camp. After decades of living under Israeli military occupation, enduring daily restrictions and uncertainty, many Palestinians rose up in the First Intifada, believing they could no longer remain silent. Israel responded with military raids, curfews, and violence. Sitti carried the weight of protecting her children from fear and violence, while wondering whether they would ever know the security of a permanent home. Time moved forward. The children became adults. Some remained in Jenin, others left for Jordan or further abroad. The family spread across countries but remained bound together by shared memories and stories of Nouris. In 1999, after decades of hardship and resilience, Muhammad died from prostate cancer. For Sitti, another chapter of loss had begun, and then came the Second Intifada, which would last 5 years. Violence swept through the region, and the family's home in Jenin refugee camp was destroyed by the Israeli army. Standing amid the rubble, Sitti mourned many things. She grieved for her home, for the memories buried beneath the broken concrete, and for the necklace given to her by her father. But one loss hurt more than any other. Somewhere beneath the wreckage was the key to the family home in Nouris. To many people, it would have seemed an ordinary key. To Sitti, it represented history, identity, and hope. As the eldest child, she had been entrusted with safeguarding it. The key symbolized the home they had lost and the dream, however distant, of one day returning. For a year, the family lived in a tent while their house was rebuilt. And when reconstruction was finally complete, they made a remarkable decision. Rather than move back into the house themselves, they dedicated it to the children of the camp, transforming it into Tafawk, a centre of excellence for children. The family built another home for themselves nearby. Tafawk became a place where children could play, study, received help with homework, and learn English. It became a refuge, not from physical danger, but from hopelessness. In a place marked by generations of displacement and conflict, Tafawk offered something precious: opportunity, and it was there that visitors and volunteers came to know Sitti and her family. Sitti had lost her home, her village, her land, her possessions, and many of the people she loved. She had been displaced several times. Yet despite everything, she and her family worked to create a space of care, learning, and community. In the classrooms and laughter of Tafawk, in the resilience of her children and grandchildren, and in the memories carried across generations, Sitti kept alive both the pain of what had been lost and the hope of what might one day be found again. Tafawk was more than a building. It was proof that even after a lifetime of exile, hope can still find a home. But even in old age, Sitti was not left to live in peace. In 2019, when she was 104 years old, Israeli soldiers raided her home at night. Unable to stand, she was beaten for not complying. Her one wish was to return to her beloved Nouris, where she was born, grew up, married, had children, and saw her future. Sadly, Israel denied her her right to return, and Sitti died in 2020, never seeing her homeland again.